If you are using the Assistants API, here are two quick reasons why you need to change to the responses endpoint, at least in the next few months. The first reason is that they are depreciating the Assistants API. That is not surprising. Well, I mean, there was always a risk because it's been in beta the whole time, and you certainly should be wary about putting anything into your production apps that depends on a beta. And so it will be sunset in a date in 2026. And based on feedback, they've basically taken all of the good features of Assistants and of chat completion, and they've combined them into responses. And I'll be demoing how we can do the switch in this video. The second reason, if we just have a look at the Assistants playground, I've created an assistant here. I've got a system prompt. And if I just go ahead and I clear the thread, it was a real pain to use Assistants in Bubble, because if I just ask a simple question, how can you help me? And then I run, just look at the amount of API calls that are required. And the fact that I've not got streaming turned on, you can see that even OpenAI's way of checking the run status and steps is to run all of these calls. I mean, it's still going, These are all workload units that you're wasting in your app, because if you use the responses endpoint, you make a single call and you get a single response, and you save it. In fact, because it's writing I mean, it's not even a long response, but just look at that, and that's very inefficient to do in Bubble, because if we look at the way I had this set up when I first demoed the Assistants API, basically I was saying every second check if there's new messages in the thread. I think, having spoken to quite a few Bubble coaching clients where you can book a one-to-one call with me, there's a link down in the description. The reason that people went with Assistants is twofold. One is that they thought they needed it in order to set up like a template to use. For example, here's my system instructions. Previously called system prompt, now called instructions in the responses API. But they thought, if I wanted to basically create, you could write pages in here, and if I wanted to create that, and then I want to have the users of my app engage with that persona that I've created, I would have to use an assistant. Well, that's not true. I'm going to show you how you can do that with the responses API in a few moments. The second thing being file search. It used to be that the only way that you could upload files to OpenAI, for them to store, for them to vectorize, for them to enable you to basically search your knowledge base and retrieve relevant data, you had to do it through the assistants. Well, you can now do that in a very similar way through the responses. We've definitely got an individual video on that, and seeing how time goes in this video, I might get around to it. But let's just take what we've got here. Let's go on to the web page here. So as a reminder, I've got send, I create a thread, I run the assistant, I display new data, and I update the run ID. There's just too much going on here. There is a simple way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this page and then just show you how we can add in the responses API and just how much simpler it is. So I'll call this one assistant to response, and we'll clone this page just in case I need to come back to how the Assistants API works. Right, so we will first of all set up a responses call in our API connector, and this will be using exactly what I've already got set up here. Here it is. If you want more details covering how you use the Bubble API connector and OpenAI and responses, whether it's Claude, OpenAI, do check out our other videos. If you become a member, you get access to all our videos, and you can find instant answers using our AI assistant to your burning Bubble questions. We've literally saved people hours and hours building their Bubble apps. So I'm going to just scroll down, and I'm going to add in another call, and I also call this send message to responses, just so it's really clear. And then we're going to go into our API documentation. You see they put it right the way down the bottom now. Responses is what they've launched. It's clearly where they're putting their attention. They're releasing new features. Like I say, they're bringing together everything that you could do across different endpoints. For example, with response, you can do image search, web search, file search, streaming, all of reasoning. It all just works in a single endpoint, and that's why it's the one that I recommend. So let's go back in here, and we'll paste in our endpoint. We'll say it's an action, and we'll go ahead and close that tab. We'll just copy this bit in. Okay, Now, just so that I can save a few pennies, I'm going to put that in as mini, and we will initialize the call. And of course, you can now, as of May 2025, you can stream the responses. I won't be covering that in this video, as I've already recorded several on the topic. But we get back our response, and we're saving it because we're teaching Bubble the structure of the response that comes back. So now let's go back to our page here. And first thing I need to do is we've got our threads. So this is a data type that I created. If I go back to the other page, GPT, well, in fact, I need to go back to our page because it still works. This is a clone. So I'm creating a thread. I don't need that. And I don't need this. Basically, I just need a data type. If I want to build a chat-like app and group messages together, I just need a data type that's going to let me do that. And instead here, we'll simply go to here. Okay, because I don't need any of this anymore. I don't know if this is a bug that other people have found in Bubble, but when you delete stuff now, it tends to needs a refresh. Maybe it's some sort of browser extension I've got. Right. So here's how you use responses. We're going to create a new thing. Now, this is a demo app that I've used loads of times, and I've already got a message data type set up, just so that we're clear what's going on here. Message. So you need somewhere to store the text, and you need a role. I've recorded some videos on error handling before. In fact, let's just delete response. So that, there we go. Right. So this is where we're going to save the response or the user input, and we need role. And role is an option set because we basically have to declare, is it the assistant or is it the user? What I'm referring to there is when you send a message. So there are two ways. Here's another important thing to consider. There are basically two ways of supplying a list of messages with the OpenAI response endpoint. One is that you use the response ID. So every conversation has a unique ID, and OpenAI is now storing that. Now, whether that is a good thing for the privacy of the users, or whether that is something that you can rely on for longevity, like basically how long does it store the messages for, that's something to work out for your use case. But you can either do that, or you can, if you've used the chat GPT, no, not chat GPT, the chat completion endpoint, you can supply messages like this. So you have to declare the role as either the user or the assistant. So let's just check what we've got going on here, which is basically by clicking on one of the threads, we update the thread as current thread on the user. That's how we know what conversation we're looking at. So if I want to send a message, I'm going to say text, and this will be my multi-line input. And I'm going to say role is the user. And then I'm going to call, and I've labeled it here. If you don't see it labeled exactly like this is just what you've named it in the Bubble API connector. And I need to make a part of this dynamic. I probably could do with launching a new demo app. So many different demos here. This is what I'm looking for. Right. So this is the part I want to make dynamic. So I'm going to say input. And if I was to reinitialize now, I'd get an error because I have to put the speech marks back in. I've taken the speech marks out because we're going to make it JSON safe, meaning that we account for any special characters in the workflow. So just so that I don't break the API connector, I'm just putting a test value in there and we get a test response. Perfect. Let's go back into here. So now we take our multi-line input value, make it JSON safe. Okay, and now we want to save the response. So we make, no, we don't make changes to the thing. We create a new thing, and it is a message and text, and then we find the response. So in this case, it's going to be outputs, first items, content, first items, text. If you're unsure about that, you just kind of have to dig into the response to work out where the actual text you want to save is. And we will set this to role equals assistant. You can also use the role to determine basically if one half of the conversation is aligned to the left, if one is aligned to the right. Again, we've got videos covering that. Now, the only thing I'm missing here is to add these into the conversation. So I'm going to say current users thread, and then instead of ID, I'll just say list of messages. So this is a list of my message type. And I will add in the one the user just creates. And then I will add in the one that we create when we get the response back from OpenAI. So I can make changes to that. List of messages and step 4. Now there's an important restriction of order of operation going on here, which is that workflows in Bubble don't necessarily run in a linear manner. It used to be left to right, now it's top to bottom. They don't necessarily do that. They kind of self-optimize, which can mean that you run a workflow action before previous steps are ready. And the way that you work to limit that is by referring to an earlier step, you ensure that so step 5 is only going to run after step 4 because I'm referring to step 4 in my workflow. So I think we could go ahead and test that. So I'm going to create a new thread. I say we could test it. I'm not showing a list of messages in my repeating group. So this is another part we need to update. So now it is do a search. No, it's not. So you could do a search for messages depending on if you say message thread as your database relationship. I personally prefer kind of finding my thread or my conversation and finding its list of messages. We prefer doing that nowadays. I think it's slightly more optimized depending on how you're using it. Let's rewrite this. Let's say role display, and then let's say text. And we'll be a little bit fancy here because we'll add in some BB code to make it stand out. Cool. Right, now I think we're ready to test. So we should be able to send and receive a message, but it won't be aware of previous messages in the conversation. So I'll say, how can you help me? I also realized there's another important bit I've missed, and I'm going to add that in just a moment, which is how do we take the persona that we had currently locked into that assistant and how do we bring it in here? I think I'm on the wrong page. So I was on the page that I'd started with, not that I'd cloned. Right, let's just start a new thread. I'll say, how can you help me? Cool. And then we get the assistant back. So let's add in, if we go back to our system playground, how do we take our system instructions and add them into our response API call? Well, if we go to the documentation here, we can find you can just add it in as instructions. So we go to the API connector and just add it in. And I'm not adding them in to the API connector. I'm using a dynamic value because part of prompt engineering is to express your instructions, your system prompt, in a way that is just going to get the best from what you're asking the AI to do. So you don't want it just to be a mess or like a single paragraph, huge paragraph of text going in here. You want to be able to lay it out nicely. And the way that we do that is by going into our workflow. And when we make our API call, we use arbitrary text because then we can JSON save everything we put in there. And here is where you can say you help entrepreneurs with no code apps, and you can put in loads here. You can basically steps. If you were doing like a reasoning model, you could say first to do this, then do that. Okay, you put the persona, the description of what you want the AI to do, you put that into here. So now let's try it again just to check that that's worked. I'm going to start a new chat. I'll say, how can you help? Okay, and now it's giving me back a more detailed response. Let's just cover how we would send the conversation history. So if I go back into the API documentation, I'm not going to use previous response ID. I think I've covered that in the previous video. It's a bit easier to set up, but I basically want control over the messages that I send, and I'm storing them in my bubble app anyway. So I'm going to copy this. This doesn't express it exactly in SQL, but we can copy this. Yeah, we can copy this. So if I go back, let me just check it. So basically, instead of input and then just text, we're now sending input and a list of messages. So if I go back to the API connector, I'm now just going to rename this so it's clear to messages. It's not private. And now if I go to my work, messages with square brackets. So now if I go to my workflow, when I send my messages, I need to send a list of my messages in the structure that OpenAI is expecting. And so I can say, well, here's my current thread, here's my list of messages, and then here's the bit that makes such a difference to understand, format as text. And then if I paste in one of these, I just need the one. Delimiter, that's what's separating each one, and that's a comma. So I've just put a comma and space. Now we dynamically can insert in, well, for this message, we're saying this message's roles display. Remember, that's an option set. That's either going to be assistant or user. And then here's content. And we want to JSON safe this. So we're going to say text JSON safe. So now if I refresh, I can say, tell me more about 5. So 5 is prototyping. And so hopefully we will get back more data on prototyping, and it will show that it's contextually aware of the earlier parts in the conversation. Brilliant. Here it is. Right. Final bit. I'm not going to go into detail in this video because I have recorded a video all about using the response API with files, but just so I can point you in the right place. If we go back. So you have to provide the vector store ID, and the way that you get the vector store ID is in your API, OpenAPI dashboard. You can create a vector store, and then you can upload files to it, and there's your ID. And so, but you could upload 3 different files to that, like 3 different PDFs that form the knowledge base for your app. So be aware that there is a cost involved in this. And then you can use that ID for Bubble to retrieve data from this. And the reason that you would want to be using a vector store, whether that's with OpenAI or with Pineco, we use Xano, is that you might have so much data that you can't pass it into the system prompt. Now, you do have to weigh up, because if we go back to, I keep calling it system prompt, it's now called instructions. Obviously, anything that you put into here and all messages in the conversation are part of your token input cost that you face when running it. So you could put in 10 pages of background information to inform your assistant that you're building here, your AI assistant. And now I would say you would put that in the instruction section in your system prompt if you know that every single part of that is likely to be valuable when the AI is composing its response. In that case, you have to absorb the cost, because you're saying, here is everything that you need, and you're hiding nothing. The alternative is by vectorizing, you're getting the AI to do a search for relevant data based on the user's query, and then to only return and put in to your input and therefore your token cost what it believes to be relevant. So if it might be relevant information and you think that that's going to surface easily with a search, a vector search, which OpenAI is doing behind the scenes, then you could use the vector database. But if you know that it is vital every single time the assistant runs that it considers that information, then you have to put it in the instruction or the system prompt. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can migrate from the OpenAI Assistant API to the Response API. And of course, if you've got any questions, you can reach out, you can leave a comment, and you can join our community because we're just excited about helping people learn how to use Bubble, build web apps and mobile apps. We've got content on mobile apps coming very soon.